Hello and welcome to the Reignite Podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Bertrand, and we are over here activating assignments and burying burnout. I am super excited because we have an amazing guest that is joining us, Krystal Portorreal.
Yes.
He's a professional strategist, author, and entrepreneur with a passion for making lasting impact on every sphere of life. With a heart devoted to the Lord, she strives to reflect God's love and his kingdom in everything she does. Whether working with clients or mentoring others, she approaches every opportunity with integrity and faith. She shares her life with her wonderful husband, Laveau, and their beloved fur puppy, Charlie. Deeply involved in her local church, Krystal is grateful for the vibrant, supportive community that nourishes her spirit and fuels her mission to serve others. Help me welcome Krystal to the Reignite Podcast. Krystal, we are super excited that you're here. And today we really want to focus on the being reignited as we pivot through life, right? And so I have seen you, I think we've known each other probably about 4-ish years now, since we first kind of encountered each other and, watched from social media and all that stuff. And so when God told me that he said, hey, reach out to Krystal, I said, okay, well, what are we gonna talk about? He was like, the pivot. She has done the pivot successfully, and it will bring some insight and clarity to others that are in that situation. So, Krystal, tell me about a significant time in business or just life in general where you knew that it was time to pivot. What did that look like for you?
Well, first of all, just thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited, and I was excited when you reached out because I've been watching this whole, journey that you've been going through and talking about just being reignited. And so this topic just excites me. But as Danielle mentioned, I'm a brand strategist, or that's one of the things that I do. And in 2020, like a lot of people, my business took off. I was so excited because I had been in business for 6 years and it was like boom, in
Yes,
2020. Like everybody was at home starting a
yes,
business, all of this stuff going on. And so I really dove head first into that whole stream that was just flowing of, business and coaching and all of the things. And when I did that, I didn't really stop first to try to make sure of what I actually wanted in my business. I think I had spent 6 years of time not really just kind of floating along. If I could get a client, cool. If not, then it just kind of hustling, really, and more of a hustle and startup mentality. And so when things began to take off and I didn't have that alignment, I quickly started like working myself into burnout because I had no plan of like, I didn't know how many clients I wanted. People would ask me questions like, how many clients can you work with a month? And Danielle, I wouldn't even be able to answer them. I'd be like, just whoever comes along, like, I don't know, you know
I'll
what I
figure
mean?
it out. Yeah.
And so it that was just a recipe, me being not having a significant, plan and sitting with the Lord and getting aligned and not really planning things out. That was just a recipe for burnout.
Yeah.
And so as 2020 went along and then into like 2021 and really towards the beginning of 2022 was just a time where I began to experience burnout. It started with my health really and just being tired and feeling like I don't know if I can get up and actually go another day.
Yeah.
Like it was a whole like drama movie, like sitting in the tub crying type of situation. And so that was a really time for sure.
Yeah, and burnout is something that it can affect anybody at any time, especially like you said, there was no plan, right? And a lot of times
Yeah.
we start businesses or even in our careers, which we just happy to be there, right? And it's like, yeah, we want you to be happy to be there, but there needs to be a plan of rest, a plan of rejuvenation. Like, how are you going to refuel yourself? through, because you're giving so much, because I think people are just so happy to be there. They give a lot on the front end, and then they didn't have a plan to ever replenish themselves, or they thought the business or the career or the relationship was just going to do that naturally. And then they quickly found out, like, oh, wait, yeah, this was not, you know,
That is
gonna happen. Yeah, like, oh well, I just, I'm assuming, well, if I'm making money, I'm gonna be fine or whatever. Or if I'm in this relationship with this person and I'm giving all of this, of course I'm gonna receive it. And so we have set expectations that honestly don't get fulfilled usually because we haven't communicated it, first of all, but they usually don't get
right.
fulfilled. And then we find ourselves burned out. And the other person, whatever, even the business might be thriving, but if you're a business owner, your business is thriving and you're not, are you really successful? Because it kind of needs, both of them, or otherwise you're in a toxic situation. It's
Yeah, because I was not only was I feeling it, my husband was feeling it because I was working so
yeah,
much. Like it was affecting every other part of my life. Like even though I was still saying I'm spending time with God, that time was real quick.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
like morning, and then I wasn't doing the date nights with hubby, or I was really not paying attention to other areas of my life because I was just giving all to this business that I yeah, it was just the burnout was real,
Yeah.
and it lasted for years is the thing. And a lot of people I think that like, okay, this burnout is like, oh, I had a nervous breakdown and that was it, right? It's not always that. Sometimes it's like you are literally living in burnout for
Yeah.
years. And that's what I
Yeah.
experienced. And I think that's why really it took a toll in a lot of different areas.
And that's a key point because some people will just think, oh, well, if I'm burnt out here, well, let me stop that and do something else because they think the activity is the problem. Well, the activity showed you where the burnout was, but just changing does not mean that you all overcome burnout. Just it's over now. There is residue that you need to heal from. And I think understanding that you need to heal from burnout has to be more important. Like, oh, well, burnout is just over. No, no, no. You need to actually heal from it so that you can avoid it the next time because it's always gonna be knocking if you don't have if those
Right.
traits that allowed it in or not, if that ambition is not put under some control, if it was business or whatever, maybe there was some greed there or some pride, or if those things are not addressed, it's going to come back no matter what you're doing. And so I think understanding that and actually putting some parameters around yourself is going to help burnout bounce off of you rather than bury you, right? Like it might come knocking, but it's not going to put you under. You will be aware of it. You can address it head on versus, hey, you look up and it's been 2 years and it's like, wait, I'm exhausted, like fully
And
exhausted.
I love that you brought up like greed and pride because that's something that people wouldn't think about when you think about burnout.
Mhm.
And I know for me, one thing that I was experiencing, a lot of it was pride because I like to do what I was doing. Like I like to get on social media and
Uh-huh.
make videos and do
Uh-huh.
all of the marketing. I loved doing that. So I assumed pridefully
Uh-huh.
that I would never burn out. Like I used to look at people taking social media breaks and being like, that it's just because they're like they don't like doing it or whatever. I had some reason.
Uh-huh.
It was like, no, girl, you're actually like living in burnout and you don't even realize it. And it was like a lot of it was also fear
Yeah.
because it was fear of if I am not continuing to go hard at every single thing it is that I'm doing. And for me, it was mostly business, but it's like that fear of if you're not in it doing it, right, and not taking your hands off of it and allowing God to do the
Yeah.
thing. But if you're not in it doing it constantly, then it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so it's like if I would ever stay off of social media for even a few days, it got to the point where I would be like, if I'm off for a few days, then this or that's going to happen in my business. And that wasn't true. That was all in my head. But it was just fear set in because I didn't realize I was burnout.
And what happens is, to that point, I feel like I always have to be doing something, or it's like, well, God is saying, hey, well, we're building something and you get to really test your foundation, right? When it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I need to step hands, I need to take my hands off of it for a second. If it otherwise, you're almost telling God, hey, God, I got this. Like, if I'm not there, it's not gonna work. I don't care if you there or not. I got to be present, or otherwise, people are going to go find somebody else to do it, or all of these things. And what happens with burnout is that it starts to burn on both ends. It's not just like, oh, okay, well, we're burning out because of the business and it's just going down. No, internally, you're burning out too. And so it's burning from both ends. And then there's nothing left, right? And so, living in that space of burning from both ends, whether it's relationship, whatever that looks like, we have to understand that, hey, this cannot, we can't keep going this way. So you understood that you were experiencing burnout. What did you do to either change that situation or remove yourself from it? What was your next steps after saying, oh, wait, I've been living in this for almost 3 years?
Yeah. So once we got to, like towards the beginning of 2022, like I was saying, really the Lord was the one who was like, we're gonna have to do something
Uh-huh.
about this
Yeah.
because it was unbeknownst to me. Like I knew I was starting to feel tired, but I didn't really know what was going on
Yeah.
in the background with my health and everything. But the Lord knew. And
Mhm.
so literally I was sitting at this computer one day and I saw a water faucet and like one of those outside ones, and I saw like this hand turning it off. And it didn't look like a creepy hand, like anything
Yeah.
scary, but I just saw turning the water off. And I thought, ooh, I said, Lord, what was that? Because it didn't feel good. It felt
Yeah.
like a dad, like you getting ready to get a whooping or something. And I was like, Lord, what was that? And he was like, I'm turning that off for
Yeah.
now. Like, we're going to have to. And I knew immediately. And like, Danielle, I kid you not, I had one more client after that in 2022. And then I went the entire year
Yeah.
where I didn't have any, like, I had a bunch of strategy clients where I
Yeah.
was just having conversation,
Yeah.
but I didn't have any clients where I was like doing the
Or
thing.
yeah. Mhm.
And I like the Lord was like, you have to back up off of this. And in that backing up, it wasn't just backing up and saying, okay, now I'm just going to sleep more
Yeah.
and not do the thing
Yeah.
anymore. It
Yeah.
was like, I'm going to back up into abiding and seeking the Lord for what it is that He actually wants me doing. And believe me, by no means was this easy.
Uh-huh.
Because a lot of times we have a vice grip on something that is literally leading us into burnout when the Lord is trying to like have us like pry our hands from
Yeah.
that for
Like
a
a
second.
baby,
So
like
that
they have that grip that's like, come on, like you can't be that strong.
like, you just grab it, and this is what we do.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, let me just pry your hands from that for a
Yeah. Yeah.
second so that you can lay these things down. Nothing will be ever wasted,
Yeah.
but there's a time where you have to lay things down so that he can realign you, especially if your burnout had anything to do with not being in alignment,
Yeah.
right? That was kind of I started, he started doing that internal work, and then I ended up going to the doctor and getting towards the end actually of 2022 or maybe the middle, and started realizing that I literally had an iron level of like 3 or something. Like it was like dangerous to the
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
where I had to go through a whole series. And if anybody's ever been through that, it's not like you just go get some iron and go get some blood real quick and you're cool. It's like a process. And so I had to go through a process and actually ended up having surgery towards the beginning of 2023 that ended up like rectifying the whole situation. But it was a time. But me backing off and listening to the Lord literally saved my life. And I think that that's one thing that I would love to just drive home in this point of like when you feel like you are experiencing burnout and you are feeling that tug to say, okay, I need to like back off of something or maybe put something down or maybe shift or realign something. A lot of times it could be because not because the Lord is trying to take something away from you, but because He's trying to make sure to give you life. He's trying to save your life in the
Yeah.
midst of it all. So,
I love that. And so many people, they end up with heart attacks or strokes and all this stuff. And they like, well, what happened? It's like, but here's the thing. Usually everybody else can see it.
yeah.
We like, oh, I can't believe I didn't know this was happening. And it's like everybody like, what we gotta do.
Mhm.
Like everybody else is aware, and I think self-awareness is very important to have because I think when we, do that reflection, it's like, wait, when the last time did I have 8 hours of sleep, or did I eat an actual meal for lunch? I wasn't working and eating, or, when is the last time I actually lived a life like a human being and not a robot?
Right.
Because a lot of times we can get into that no matter what profession it is, we can just go, go, go. And there's a lot of that has to do with some of it, depending on who you are, might be people pleasing. Like, hey, I don't want people to be upset with me. If I don't do this, maybe they don't want, are they going to want me around anymore? Or all these reasons that are none of why God actually called you to do the thing, right? And so that's what the enemy does. He perverts things. So God might have called you to that industry, but the enemy has perverted, like, oh, well, you got to be the best. And if you don't launch something before the new year, then bump that. Like, you don't even worry about it because nobody gonna be checking for you. Like, he will lie to you in your own voice sometimes and bring up the insecurities that you already have. And he is forcing burnout. Like, some of it is not you self-inflicting it, but it's the enemy is literally talking you into burnout because he's trying to bury your actual assignment and just work, 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 grind, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And we saw a lot of that, especially in 2020. Let's get it, right? Like we got time. You said you wanted time. Here you go. Like, let's get it done. But for some people, God was calling people to actually get to it, but the enemy was perverting it with grinding, with hustling, with I can't go to sleep until I, make 20,000 and, just unrealistic things
Yeah.
that is like, first of all, not that you don't need that type of money, but you're okay with, like, your world's not about to end if you don't have 20K in the bank in a week. But that's
Yeah.
what, we were moving to try to get that type of stuff. And God is like, look, I called you for an assignment. And what he's been telling me so strongly lately, excellence does not lead to exhaustion. I am not trying to exhaust you. I want it excellent. I want it to be, all these things, but I want you to sleep peacefully at night. Like, God is not going to replace you doing something great and taking your peace. Like, he doesn't move that way. He wants you to have all the fruit, right? At one time. Like, you ain't got to pick and choose of what you get to
Yeah.
do. He wants you to have them all, but a lot of times we get into the flow of things and depending on who we are around. Can you speak to who you are around and how that can help your pivot or assassinate it, depending on what people are saying?
Yes. Oh my God. I'm so glad you brought this up because the word that was popping in my head was identity. And I think a lot of times who we are around as adults,
Yeah.
whether we want to think this or not, it's not just kids who succumb to peer pressure and all these things. Who we are around as adults will help to shape the way that we think and the way that we move. And so when, in 2020, when I was leading, when it was being, going into burnout, I was around people, and it's not their fault. I don't blame anyone. But I was around a lot of people who were doing that. Oh, we got to hit this and these certain numbers, and this is what we got to do. And they'll take a hold of your business and tell you the whole plan of what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do, which, unbeknownst to a lot of people, is the exact opposite of the way that the Lord wants you to move. And so it's like you end up going down this path that has nothing to do with what you were actually supposed to be doing. I think that in order to pivot away from some of that, And a lot of people don't like to hear this, but sometimes you have to pivot away from who it was that you were around. A lot of people want to try to stay in the same crowd and make a pivot, but a lot of times that doesn't work. And it's not to say that we're just dropping
Yeah.
people, right? But it's to say that sometimes you may have to take a step back. Maybe you can't answer every phone call. Maybe you can't answer every text message, or maybe you can't get on everybody's group chat or go to every event or do all of those things. And it's not because those things are bad or that those people are bad, but it's that the way that the Lord is pivoting you in that season is trying to get you into a whole different mindset. And so in order to do that, you have to be around a different group of people sometimes. And
Yeah.
so community, I think community has been something that has been very, very instrumental in me being able to even pivot away from burnout.
Yes, I totally agree. Because if everybody is in that culture, then if as you're trying to pivot, you don't have any support, right? Like if you try to stay in it and pivot, then you're literally going against the grain. And so now you're gonna almost be seen like, well, why she not answering emails at 2 a.m.? Like that's what we do. Or, like it's when you start having boundaries, now everybody's upset because they're not in the space where they either want to pivot, it might be time for them to do so as well, but they have not come to that realization. And so, who you surround yourself with, like in this season of my life, everybody, we at peace. Like, nobody's like trying to get all of the things all at one time because you can have it all, but maybe not all at once. And be
Right.
okay with that. Like God didn't do it all in one day. He spread it out. Like we can spread it out. We have time to do that, but the culture will tell us get it done, get it done, get it done. And that
Right.
is literally more people are burnt out than they care to admit that they are. And so the purpose of even this podcast is because we understand that you might have been burning at two ends and now there is no light there. And so to reignite you and say, hey, maybe you're in the process of a pivot. This pivot is not meant to take you out. It's just meant to change your perspective, right? That's what pivots do. They change perspectives. When we're dancing, we pivot, we're going forward, and then we pivot to the side. Our perspective just changed. We're pretty much in the
Mhm.
same spot, but now we just have a new outlook. And so
Yeah.
pivoting while reigniting just means let's get a new outlook on this. Let's say, okay,
Yeah.
Holy Spirit, I know you called me for this, but what should I be looking at right now in this spot
Mhm.
so that I can move forward with grace? I can move forward with favor, with all the things that you've already assigned for me to do. And so, Krystal, with a pivot and where you are now, how would you describe who you were in let's say 2022 to right now? And coming to the end of 2024, depending on when you listening to this. But who would you describe yourself 2 years later from your burnout period?
I think back then when I was in that burnout period, if somebody would say like who you are and introduce yourself, I would have been like, I'm Krystal Portorreal. I'm a brand strategist. I'm this, I'm that. I would have been naming everything that I
Yeah.
do
Uh-huh.
because I did so wrapped in what I did for a living and how much money I make. And if I made 20K that month or
Yeah.
whatever, it was
Yeah.
so wrapped in that. And now I'm like, I'm a wife to a beautiful husband. Have our fur baby. I love to participate and do things in the local church because this pivoting away from burnout has allowed me to focus on becoming. Because I know that wherever it is that, because we're always on a journey. So I
Yeah.
can't say I'm here, I'm in it, I'm
Yeah.
doing. So I know that the journey that the Lord has me on is all about who I am becoming in the process. And I think a lot of us talk about becoming because it's a book and we think it's,
Yeah.
just as, but really when you stop to actually start saying, okay, Lord, who am I? How do you see me? And how do you see me in doing this? So if I'm going to be a strategist, how do you see me as a strategist? Who do I need to strategize for? Like actually stepping back and being able to ask those questions, I think that is how my personality is different because my identity is no longer wrapped up in what I do and all of these like worldly things.
Yeah.
It's now kingdom identity
Yeah,
of
yeah.
how does, and now it's wrapped in his view of me, and my life revolves around that.
Yeah,
So.
that is awesome. And so when we talk about, pivoting and all of those things, a lot of times God is trying to unwrap us from the things that have tied us, right? And so he's pulling all of, like you said, those identities that are not even what he wanted for us and for us to know ourselves as. He's like, but you're my daughter. Like, where's that in the bio? Like, where, like, no, we don't know. That's not cool enough right now. And so he just wants us to be who he's called us to be and know that that's a great journey to be on. Like, it is full of surprises and things that you like, wait, I didn't see that one coming. But that's what he wants to do. He wants to have the ability to do that. But when we are in burnout, we can't take a surprise. A surprise will take you out of here when you burn out. Like, oh, like your whole world is shaken up because you didn't even have the room for a surprise. Like it, you don't have the capacity. You don't have the capacity for what you're doing. But please don't throw something in there that I didn't even expect to come. And so burnout literally limits your capacity for what God has for you, and the experiences that you actually desire to have. And then you wonder, like, well, why is, I was doing well and now I'm sitting in this. But what we want to do today is really encourage you that if you're in a season of pivoting, know that it's just a change of perspective. God is still with you, and you're going to come out on the other side so much better with the lessons that you actually learned. If you sit and reflect on those things, then you can transfer those things and make better decisions and have boundaries around yourself that prevent burnout from coming to attack again, and working on that internal stuff as well. So, Krystal, if we're talking to people in different stages, but talk to somebody that is in the midst of a pivot, give them one piece of advice that you think would just help them ground themselves. Because some people, God's trying to pivot y'all. Some of y'all doing pirouettes. Y'all just turning and turning and turning. And God, like, it was a pivot, not a pirouette. Like, I was not doing all that, but you just in a whirlwind. How could you help ground them?
Well, I guess one thing I would say is to make it less complicated, to simplify. And with that, what was coming up for me was just to limit the voices that you are, just have those few people that are your wise counsel, that you know that you can trust and speak to things about no matter what season you're in. Because there are some friends where you can speak to them a certain season and they'll give you great advice in that season, but they can't give you advice in this season.
Yeah.
And so I just really feel like we are in a time where the Lord is like, what I'm giving you is like a precious pearl.
Mm,
And so the things, strategies I'm downloading, the things that I'm giving you within this pivot, you're going to take this pearl and pivot with it. And so I need you to make sure that you are not casting those pearls upon swine. Make sure that you are not casting that out to get vision from people that can't speak to the vision that I have given you. So I would really, really encourage people to not only just get quiet, and you don't have to get quiet and be alone.
yeah,
Get
yeah.
quiet also to seek the Lord and to seek wise counsel and limit the amount of people, like cut off some of the prophetic words on Instagram, because all of that is not for you, in this season, especially when you are thinking about pivoting. And the other thing I would say is remember that pruning is not always a bad thing. And sometimes when you're pivoting, it's because there's growth. And in order for growth to happen, a lot of times there has to be pruning. And
Mm,
so just remember that if there's things that God is having you release the clutches from, so to
yeah.
speak, remember that He's not going to waste those things, and to let those go for a season or whatever that looks like. Allow the Lord to do that work in you, and then you'll be able to pick back those things and do it better.
Exactly. I love all of that advice. So if you're finding yourself in a place of pivot, get quiet, get some wise counsel, understand that it is for your growth. It is God is not trying to bury you, right? And so he wants your assignments to be activated in this season and for you to go forth in what he's called you to do. Krystal, thank you so much for joining us. But we want to know how we can connect with you, what you have going on. Let the people know, and I'll put all the things in the show notes as well.
Okay, so the best place to get a hold of me, even though I'm a few places, is really right now Facebook,
Okay.
which that's been a pivot in and of itself because I used to be an Instagram girly,
Uh-huh.
and I still, but Facebook is a great place, and it's just my first and last name that you can reach me on there. You can find me there, and right now I'm doing a lot of stuff with my local church, business wise, and also just, I love to just volunteer over there. And so that's kind of what I'm working on. The Lord's doing a huge pivot here with me that I'm really, really enjoying. He's allowing me to use strategy for his kingdom, and I
Oh,
love it. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. But if you guys want to just connect, I'm on there on Facebook, and yeah, thank you for
don't
having me
you have
so
a
much.
YouTube channel?
I do have a YouTube channel. Now, how often I update it is yet to be seen. Look, we'll get back into that at some point, okay?
Yeah, but there are
But
videos already there, right?
there are
There's a
videos there.
collection of stuff. So yeah, make sure you check her out on YouTube as well. But thank you again, Christopher, for joining us. And the last thing I want to say about a pivot is when God is directing you to work with somebody, do it in that season because he might pivot them in the next, and you might not have a chance. So make sure that either you in the pivot or God is leading you. He's doing that strategically because he knows if he's about to pivot somebody. So don't hold back and say, "Oh, I'll get to it next year." They might not be doing that next year, right? Like it's just they might not offer that. Okay, so I just want to give that tidbit too because sometimes we like, "Oh, well, I'll get to it." But you might not have the opportunity with that person. So if God is leading you to do whatever that looks like, do it when you have the opportunity. Don't wait. So thank you for joining us on the Reignite podcast. Thank you for listening on Apple and Spotify and to our YouTube viewers. I'm Danielle Bertrand, and this has been the Reignite podcast where we're activating assignments and burying burnout. We'll see you next time. Bye.